Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke. I am the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. As yesterday, I'm sitting here in an iris garden, which is a little early in the season for it. Nonetheless, seeking comfort, seeking peace, seeking a daily focus on maintaining sage thought processes through lots of turmoil and excitement around the world, as I'm sure you are as well. Today's conversation is our monthly Global Chamber exporting, importing, and foreign direct investment news roundtable. And that's what it is. Typically, I'll kick it off with a few comments and then invite our members to provide comments about their perspective of what's going on in the world. There's a lot going on in the world of trade in particular, and so hopefully we'll be able to hear from you. Please make sure that your name is fully spelt out and feel free to put your company name as well on your entry here in Zoom. Feel free to use the chat and also put your information in the chat area. Put questions in the chat. And if you have a question, ideally raising your hand is the most organized way and most effective way for us to see you and weave you into the program. There will be undoubtedly times also that you could unmute and talk as well, but the hand raising just creates a little bit of order. After my comments, there's a number of people in the room I'd love to hear from, and hopefully you're available to chat. As far as kicking off the conversation, first of all, I'll say that as I mentioned yesterday, Kofi Annan's comment that arguing against globalization is like arguing against the laws of gravity. Globalization is happening, trade is increasing. It's can't be stopped. People, and particularly nationalist political initiatives, may try to change it. It's a failure from two perspectives. One is it's just happening. Technology is driving. And secondly, if you've read the book, The Rise and Fall of Nations, you'll recognize that it's a failure economically for companies not to integrate with the world. It's much better to drive exporting and have an active trade activity. Beyond that, of course, the kumbaya, especially those of us that have strong connections to Thunderbird School of Global Management, we know that borders that do trade require fewer soldiers. So there's also besides prosperity, there's an overall good benefit with trade. So it's happening. There are things that are getting in the way of making that easy, as Chris Scalise has spoken about quite a bit on LinkedIn, and hopefully we'll hear from Chris today about that. But it's happening and it's reality. And I guess these days, on the one hand, I think all of us have the ideal of what it should be. We should have transparent governments. We should have free trade. We should have no tariffs or few tariffs, other than to be able to develop or not slightly is not the right word, but to develop the economies. We know, like with Australia, when I started my career, Australia and India had very, very high tariffs. But as I got involved with Australia, I recognized as tariffs came down, it allowed their industries to be competitive. Of course, many businesses didn't last, but those that should last were now able to compete and grow and be more effective. And so we know the damage that tariffs can do, and we're seeing a little bit of that today. So ultimately, it's just not a good economic policy to have, but the fact is, it's a reality. So what do we do as exporters? What do we do as traders to be able to deal with it and process it? One of the things that came up yesterday also was that there are shifting alliances right now, and perhaps the biggest shift is the U.S. position toward Russia. And I guess in my own mind, the justification for that is it's an anti-China play. And right or wrong, I don't know if that's right or wrong. I think there's lots of flaws with the overall strategy, but I'm just recognizing it as reality. And so, as traders and as exporters and as investors, what do we do about it? And what we talked about yesterday was certainly, as Chris does, and many of us do, we speak out for free trade and the right thing to do, and I, and then you take it from there in terms of your own personal preferences and your own style. From a trading perspective, we want growth to continue. We want trade to be as easy as possible. And we also have to recognize that with those shifting alliances, we need to shift. And so that was, I think, one of the key themes yesterday and hopefully today as well, that we need to be adaptable. We need to be flexible and we need to be resilient. And each one of those words is related, but different and unique and important for us to remember. I think we also need to recognize that the reality rules the day. There are things that we want to happen that are not the way they are. And we should drive toward improvement, but the basics facts are right in front of us. And that's hard to grasp sometimes because there's a little bit of grief, honestly, involved with some of these changes. We have to go through that and digest it and process it. And hopefully you are as well. Hey, if I was involved with exporting directly on specific products today, that would be frustrating. That'd be terribly frustrating. And I know some of you are, because there's so many ups and downs with what the news is saying and what the reality is and the politics of the situation. And hopefully we're past most of this noisy period very quickly. Before I go to the next speaker, I'd like to also couch this conversation in the spirit of hope. And it's hope when I think about Archbishop Desmond Tutu or Nelson Mandela. If you've read their stories, the autobiography of Nelson Mandela is amazing, in terms of what he went through in his life and what he endured and what his vision was, but also facing the reality that was right in front of him. And he dealt with it so beautifully. It's so inspirational, and it's amazing. The current book that I recommend you read, I'm almost through it, is I think it's called Reasons for Hope, by Jane Goodall. And she talks about, mostly from a climate change perspective and how we treat nature, because that's been her career, but it goes to fundamentals that we deal with every day in the world. And that is, how, given kind of sometimes the face that we see of lack of transparency and corruption and all sorts of things that are not the way they should be, why have hope? Why think about moving forward, in terms of what we're doing? And she is brilliant. And it turns out it's a book that she wrote with a guy named Doug. And it's a conversation. I'm doing the audio book. So it's a conversation between Jane Goodall and this guy, Doug, who also is from New York and also is, like me, kind of skeptical of kind of the foo-foo stuff. Historically, that's kind of the way New Yorkers are, and that's how I was brought up. But I also recognize that hope is not foo-foo stuff. Hope is not something that we should take lightly. We have to face these realities, but we also have to move our business forward. We also, in the long term, hopefully, drive success and change. And so hopefully you all are in that same mindset. Yesterday, let's see if, Francisco is here. So Francisco, I thought I would start with you today, and I'm really glad you came here. Are you able to kick us off? Because yesterday's conversation really was driven by you and Jeff over at Factum Global. You suggested, given all the trade changes and all the things that were happening that we should have a conversation. It happened to dovetail yesterday's with this normal event that we do. We clearly need to have this conversation on a regular basis, not only to trade information, but hopefully to support each other in the next steps. Are you able to chat? I see you're muted. And oh, there
Yeah,
you
I'm
go.
here. Hey, Doug. Hello, everyone.
Would you be
Absolutely.
would you be able just to kind of kick us off and kind of uh, frame up based on what we talked about yesterday and any of the things that I've just said that were either right or wrong or what you either resonate or not with? And then, given that we have about 50 more minutes in terms of this conversation, what are some of the things that you think are important that we should cover today?
Doug, I'm really going to try to keep it very brief because I had plenty of opportunity to talk yesterday, and I was really looking forward to hearing other people's perspectives. But I do appreciate the opportunity to say a couple of words. I think in my mind, you sort of summarized it beautifully. It's easy to get in the game of noise and to see only the negative or the potential consequences of what's going on. And what I meant is that I keep hearing from some people still conversations about the new normal, which was something, and a phrase that came out of COVID initially. Here's the new normal post COVID, and now we're calling the new normal post Trump and the new normal post whatever happens. I don't think that there is such a thing as a new normal. The only constant is that we live in a world of constant change. These things are going to keep happening, whether it's a new president or a new, unfortunately, a new war, or hopefully we won't have a pandemic for a while, but they will come. So all of these things happen. They have happened throughout history, and you were hitting on what to me is the main aspect of all this, and is adaptability. So are we as businesses, as consultants, as advisors, focusing on how to react to these shifts and the things that are being thrown our way, or are we focused on building resilience, adaptability, and strategies that are easy to sort of prove against those types of things? So that's one aspect, adaptability. The second piece is diversification. It's no longer an option, I don't think, to think about that you can do business in the way that we did years ago. And I think the biggest risk that a company can have right now is to not diversify and to not look at the markets that could give them an opportunity for growth. So while it used to be a nice to have and a next step, and we'll see how we get there, I think right now it's probably the wisest strategy to figure out how you diversify not only the markets where you're producing revenue, but also your supply chain, your every aspect of your business. The biggest risk is not doing that, in my opinion. And I'll close by saying that today I was just listening to Michelle Caruso Cabrera from CBS, and she was interviewed because the spending in Germany on defense is going to go up substantially. I think they have 2.5% right now, and if they go up to 3 or 4%, we're talking about billions of dollars in spending, and the other European countries are going to follow suit. So you can imagine what that means in terms of opportunities, and that's just one example. This is happening everywhere. We talked about regionalization as the new form of globalization. We're seeing all these new alliances. You mentioned them, Doug. So the message is, how do we take advantage of these new opportunities? How do we play a role to build bridges between not only companies and people, but countries? I think the private sector has a role to play, and we cannot leave it only to our leaders and politicians to dictate what's going to happen. So together we can definitely change things as well. We can advocate for things that make sense, and we can definitely continue to build something that makes sense for the international community. But I'm looking forward to hear what others have to say. What are you seeing in different aspects of this, from the logistics side, from the legal side? always looking to learn what everyone else is seeing. So thanks, Doc, for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Oh, you started by talking about wars, and I Googled that. It turns out right now there are 56 conflicts going on in the world today, and it's the most since World War II. So that feeling like there's kind of stuff boiling underneath the surface of things is true. We're seeing more of that today, and that's not helping trade. But the point that you made around certainly adaptability and diversification, I think, are critically important, and opportunity. And so, to the military opportunity that you mentioned, I'll just give a quick example of that. We did the Semiconductor Summit. A week or two ago at Global Chamber headquarters, a fourth annual one. And we've timed that one, it turns out, because it was sponsored by the Japanese government. And we timed it with the Matsuri, the Japanese festival in Phoenix. And so that we could do the Semiconductor Festival, the Japanese companies could come in and talk about some of the opportunities, and then they could go to the festival afterwards. And so we've been doing that for 4 years. This year, when all these Japanese companies came to Global Chamber and to our Semiconductor Summit, for the first time, they visited Tucson, Arizona. And I wasn't sure exactly what was going on, but it turns out, you may know, that the Japanese prime minister has committed to the U.S. to have a stronger military. So they encouraged the Japanese companies to visit the military suppliers that are in Tucson for the first time. So that is opportunity. That's business. So it's just, it is what it is, whether you're interested in it or not, or is just the market reality, right? So one of the people that's in the room here, and I don't know, Ildiko, if you can chat or if you're open to speak, but being from the EU and being from Europe, if you can say a few words. I think you were part of yesterday's conversation, and I'm just wondering, given what you're seeing from Europe's side of things, is there anything else that you'd like to contribute to the conversation today?
Hello, thanks. Is actually, I haven't seen any controversies for the US tariff at the moment, but it's depend when President Trump will be introduced and treat the EU actually with the suggested extra tariff. So, and all I know on the UK side, because I'm actually based in the UK, they working closely and they try to avoid the extra tariff. So I think President Trump mentioned is a free trade agreement or a trade agreement possible between the UK and the USA for this 4 years period when his presidency, but we'll see, as everything changes every single day now.
Yeah. The last few years during the last administration, there was not an overall UK-US agreement. It was discouraged, and so the UK has been working state by state in the US in terms of development.
Yeah, that's correct.
Relationship. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next, if they'll adjust their strategy, but that's the way the UK has been adjusting to the US market anyway. Are there some other things about the UK and trade that we should know about? Are there some markets opening up in Eastern Europe
But all I know, they restarted the trade agreement between UK and India, which should be the biggest one. But as you mentioned yesterday, I just had a recorded webinar for all the upcoming changes which actually need to be get ready for the UK and the EU as well in the next 2-3 years.
Yeah, I think you just talked about that at Global Chamber, and I think there's a blog post that's going to go up. But I think, Jim, we have the video of that, don't we? Of Ildiko's last Globinar on that.
I can share also in the chat.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Ildiko. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Sorry to surprise you.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. I see, I think this is Sophia at Ameroc Export. Sophia Ligeti, are you available to chat? Because you're originally from Morocco,
Right.
based in the Midwest, and you do a lot of both importing and exporting, and you deal with China quite a bit, usually with very low priced tires and other materials. What are you seeing out there right now, and what's the landscape in the products and services that you're involved with?
Thank you, Doug, for the opportunity. Hello, everybody. My name is Sofia Lagidi, the president and the founder of Ameroc Export. We are exporting automotive products made in USA to several countries. I participated in 9 trade missions and trade shows. We did some business with some other countries, but my focus was and still Moroccan markets. I'm originally from Morocco, and we do have free trade agreements with Morocco. Yes, after COVID, it was challenging, but I keep focusing in that market. Back what you were saying, yes, we were facing a big challenge, competition of the Asian market, also European ones. Our main product is heavy equipment, industrial tires, and automotive lubricants. Now, with what's going on, I think the strategy keep focus. What we are doing, what we know to do, is export to Morocco and also keep eye open for new opportunities. Next month, I'm traveling to Morocco, and why not see other opportunities? Maybe import, see what's the product. But again, right now, keep focusing what we are doing and keep our eyes open for new opportunities, mainly in the Moroccan markets.
One of the things that I heard from China was that this year the Chinese exporters will be extra active because production has exceeded sales within China. So they're looking for markets to sell their products. And so have you seen any additional activity? And Africa actually was and Europe were both 2 markets that I heard that they were going to be more active in this year. Have you seen any of that yet?
No. As I said, my laser focus in the Moroccan market, for European markets or other African markets, I'm not aware about that.
Okay, got it. Well, thank you for your leadership in exporting and your award-winning exporting as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any resolution with that issue with the CBP, the extra charges that they cost
Well,
you?
that is, I'm sorry, interrupting you, just because still nightmare for me. Again, when I mentioned after COVID, we were struggling to get our customers back on track. When you mentioned China, some of our customers just are buying from Asia, mainly Sri Lanka, as you know, they are exporter #1 in rubber products. Then for working so hard to get very good customers, as you know, that transaction was the biggest one, 8 containers of forklift trucks. Unfortunately, with the US Customs, that was a nightmare. I don't know, and I still don't understand why they put their hand on my containers. The time when they were regular containers, it cost $13,700. That's almost our profit from this transaction. How can we continue working hard to get customer back on track or get new customers? At the end, when the transaction is going through, we find ourselves having this struggle with US Customs for no reason. I am more than 15 years in this business. I never had this exam charges. And it seems there is a third party that third party's private company or agency in Virginia port, they have a hand with US Customs. It seems like I'm trying to analyze what's going on. And again, how in the world they go and have my containers inspected? It is almost our profit from this transaction. Do you think we go back to customers and tell them, I need this extra, $13,000, and we just got these customers after COVID. Again, you see, you can feel my frustration, but it's not only us that has to be heard. The decision maker, they have to know what's going on. Yesterday, I had conversation. I have now another transactions for tires, and I trying to get another shipping company. And I told them, I shared with them what's happened with the U.S. Customs. They said, we are having this problem all the time. And now the freight forwarders who are aware what's going on in Virginia ports, they are not having the route from Virginia ports. They are trying to get New York or other ports instead of Virginia. But I was a victim in this situation. I'm not giving up. This issue has to be heard. I'm sorry, guys, to hear that, but it is a frustration for us to find working so hard just at the end to pay suppliers, shipping companies, and now with the U.S. Customs. That's his frustration and discouraging.
It's got to be terrible. So sorry that hasn't been resolved yet. I know Demetrius Evans has been involved in that. I know there's a couple people in the room, either Joe or Chris. This is an area that both of you guys probably see on a daily basis. I don't know if there's anything you can do in this particular case, but I know both of you have some comments overall. Would either Joe or Chris, would you like to either comment on Sophia's issue or other topics as well?
I'll jump in if you don't mind and leave time for Chris. But Sophia, it's an unfortunate problem that exists in our industry. But one of the ways to mitigate that is to look at your Incoterms. So rather than you having that burden when you're bringing those goods in, if you use Incoterms and have the title transfer happen in, when it leaves the port, on the water, when it arrives, then that burden would be upon your customer. Now, it is an undue burden, but it is typical that the government systems stratify entries in the sense that if you're a first-time importer bringing something in from a new country.
I'm sorry, Joe, to interrupt you. This is not for imports, it's exports. I can understand for containers coming to the country to have this exam. I can understand, but this one is exports from US to Morocco.
It's unfortunate, but it happens the same way. They go through stratification. If you're not a known exporter, and the way the regulations are written, they'll have it drayed to a facility. You have to pay for the dray.
Sophia's been exporting for how many years?
Yeah,
more than 15 years right now.
Yeah, she's known. So that's part of the frustration.
Yeah.
But again, what you say, Joe, to put the burdens on my customer's shoulder, that's why we don't want that. I mean, to gain the trust of the customers when they trust us to deliver, so they are relying on us to solve the problems or to have the transactions go smooth.
Yeah, I wish I could say it's unheard of, but I'm hearing more and more of that.
That's unfortunate. So if anybody has ideas for Sophia, please connect up in the chat area or just let us know and we'll get you connected there. Overall, thank you, Sophia. Thank you for
Thank you, Doug, for all what you're doing and also to be involved in this situation. And we are now waiting from the U.S. Customs to get back to us with their decision. We see. Thank you all.
I don't know if you were in yesterday, but I mentioned actually Demetrius is involved with another shipping problem where she's got a customer with a container stuck in Togo and Lome, Togo, that is in customs and they can't get it out. So we've got some people on the Africa side helping out with that. So if Joe, are you seeing more of this, or what are some of the trends that you're seeing right now? Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Joe Burks, working for Vigilant Global Trade Services. I'm a licensed customs broker. I've been importing and exporting for several Fortune 500 companies and been involved in it for now just over 40 years. So I've been around a while. And I'm seeing more and more where they just all of a sudden they're validating what's going on. And Sophia, it's a shame, but I don't know if you saw a Wall Street Journal report that the Chinese are still getting a hold of our goods, even though they're sanctioned. Okay. So they're getting hold of the chips that are used in AI, and it's sanctioned from going to China. But what they've done is they've set up buying entities all over the world, and they're trying to stop that. So this is part of the precipice for what's happening to you, is that the government is starting to look at what's happening, where it's happening, and making sure that these goods aren't going to go to Morocco and be diverted. Perfect example is not too long ago, there was a CNC machine that ended up in Estonia. And it turns out that CNC machines are controlled. And it was the Estonia government that caught it because it was being redirected to Russia. They came to the US government and they found out that it was being rerouted. There's two people in the UK that were arrested and are being jailed. The customer or the manufacturer in the US has received a significant fine. So all they're trying to do is to make sure what you say that is there, and then your customer is real on the other end, that it's not a fake front.
Um, Francisco, you're still there, and before we'll come back to Joe. But did you want to mention about the survey? Are you still there?
Thanks, Doug. I'm here. Yes, I'm about to leave. Thank you. And Joe, that's really interesting. I hope we can hear more of that. Unfortunately, I had a conflict. We are conducting a global survey to measure sentiment over global business. It's out there for the whole world to answer. The more, the better. I would appreciate if you all could please take 3 to 5 minute stops and answer the survey. I just put the link on the chat. And if you can share with your networks in the places where you're at, the more information, the better. We do produce a really good report with all the insights, and it will be sent to you during the survey. We ask you where you want it sent, and it will be sent to you once it's closed and produced. So thank you, Doc. Thank you, everyone, and let's keep the conversation going.
Keep up the good work. Thank you. That's Francisco from Factum Global. Joe, back to you. Is there anything else that you wanted to share? And then maybe it's appropriate for you to introduce Chris. And I'll just say about Chris is that he started the Global Chamber in Buffalo, New York, where I'm from downstate New York, but I went to high school in upstate New York. So we have an alliance around that, the Southern Tier and Buffalo and snow and cold winters and things like that. You've got it a little bit better. You're in Atlanta, are you based in Atlanta?
Yes, sir. South side of Atlanta.
Little bit better. Anything else that you'd like to share? And then would you like to introduce Chris when you're available?
Yeah, it's dynamic times. I get a lot of my friends and peers complaining. And one of the things that I tell them, I said, guys, it's job security. Our goal is to adapt and figure out what they're doing and plan those next steps. And that's one of the reasons why I do what we do is that we help companies navigate those waters and help them do any of the work from importing and exporting. And with that, Chris Scalise and I have been friends for many, many years and work in the same industry. He actually works for a forwarder. I work for a managed services / consulting firm. So with that, Mr. Scalise, you want to take it over?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And I'll tell you, thank you, Joe, and thank you, Doug, and everybody on this call. It is really a true honor, and to learn about the things that you're working on. I'm very excited about the survey, Francisco. I definitely will share that out to my network of people, and then hearing the other stories about export. These I got to say are uncertain times, and it's tough. I've been in international for over 25 years. I spent half of my career working for a Canadian consulate, government, NGOs, non-government organizations, as Doug mentioned, was involved with the Global Chamber. And then actually did the move over, they call it the evil private side, right? And helping companies with trade compliance. So I work with Mohawk Global Logistics, but our division is Mohawk Global Trade Advisors. We are trade consultants for companies. We help do a two-prong approach, dealing with mitigating risk, and then also looking for ways for financial recovery, such as like duty drawback, utilizing foreign trade zones, establishing them, and so on. But, you know, as I've been watching over the last couple of weeks, and actually, thank God I went to a commercial, CNBC's over my head with Peter Navarro talking about trade policy, and I just shake my head, being somebody as an academic. These guys do not understand what's going on. And even Steve Leisman mentioned this today. He said it wasn't until, you know, they enacted these tariffs of 25% that all of a sudden word got in their ear and said, hey, what about with USMCA? You know, what about these auto companies? A car crosses some of these cars cross the Canadian border 8 times. You know, it will have the chassis built in the US, it will cross the border, the engine will be built, it will cross back and forth. And they said, oh my gosh. So that's why we saw this recent news. And as I was talking earlier before the call kicked off with Doug, is I think people in our industry is going through fatigue. And I call it trade fatigue, because it's happening. It's not. It's happening. It's not. And he has advisors who I would expect to be some of the brightest people in the room, but they're not giving the valuable advice. They're not seeing where things are at people at the ground level where things are happening, which leads to exports. You know, one of the things I got involved with exporting and helping companies trade, whether it was US or Mexico or Southeast Asian companies in China and Indonesia, Thailand, it was very rewarding. And everybody on the call can probably maybe contest to this. When we create an export, and a company does an export and they do anywhere between $250,000, it creates one job. That one job creates one family. That family has one Christmas. That family buys one house. And you're kind of taking that rock, the advice that we give them, is throwing that in the water, and that's creating that ripple effect. And it's so fulfilling. It's almost like a rush of helping, like when you teach a company how to trade and do import and export. And then we have our friends from the U.S. Department of Commerce, and they cover their ears and say, no, we don't want to hear about import because we're taking away U.S. jobs. And we have to re-educate them and retool them and say, that's not true. The best companies that import are the best companies that export. They shop the world for the best products and the best services to build these final products to not only sell domestically, but to sell all across the world. And it's very frustrating, because I see things as a paradigm shift, as has occurred in the first Trump administration. Going back to TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was established prior to the Trump administration, it was established with 11 different countries: Canada, US, Mexico, Germany, and others, to kind of keep China in check. And in 2018, the Trump administration said, no, we're not going to be involved with this. So they pulled out. And the crazy thing was, the 11 countries remained. And now they established what is known as the CTTPP, right? Without the US. And these countries remain together. And now what has happened is China has now applied. So talk about something that has really changed. We talk about pushing China out, keep them in check, and we create this program. And in 2018, we pull out. And now we're now threatening tariffs with our strongest ally, Canada, Mexico, where we're located, soon to possibly be Europe at 25%, additional tariffs on China. And what a fascinating report that they're referring to is a report back in 2019 from the White House Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy. It was on reciprocal tariffs. And I'd be glad to share this report. I'll send it out to you, Doug, if you want to send it out to the team if they want to see it. It's called the United States Reciprocal Trade Act, Estimated Job and Trade Deficit Effects. And it was based on all the countries around the world that we trade with. And it's saying that this is what they're going to base these tariffs on. So for example, I think it was Cameroon. They had like 5,000 tariff lines that were actually Cameroon. I'm looking at the report right here. 5,037 product lines where the partner applies higher tariff, 97% tariff. where we have tariff lines of 104. So that kind of sends a bad message to this administration. They're not seeing the bigger picture. So all of a sudden they're thinking, okay, if Cameroon's going to do these tariffs, we're going to hit them with 97% tariff rates without knowing the impact. So the reason why I say this is yesterday we were having team meetings about before the news came out with USMCA. It broke my heart because there was a company from Canada that was trading since the mid 90s with NAFTA, back with NAFTA. They purchased over $1 million worth of equipment. Their margins were about 10%, maybe a little less, a little more. And they all of a sudden, even though they had free trade agreements, now the 25%, they were now paying $250,000 in duties. He basically said, we're going to go bankrupt. We're going to close our doors. The Canadians are saying the same thing. The SMEs are shaking their head going, we're not going to survive. And that's where our countries are built off of, not these large corporations that are like the automotive. Sure, they're going to take an impact and that will result in losing jobs. But we're also seeing SMEs that are being impacted as well. And just one last moment before I end. And where I'm seeing is, as you guys are aware of looking at some of this economic data, we're seeing things happening. Retail stores are filing in bankruptcy. We're seeing a shift in jobs. We're seeing consumer sentiment was at its lowest in a very long time, which first started to shift in the markets. So we see these breaks in the dam that are still coming. And what is the new administration doing? They're taking a wrecking ball and they're trying to hit that dam, whether, doing Doge and laying off government employees and then bringing them back and laying them off. And they're creating tariffs and then bringing them back and changing them. So there's a lot of there's a lot of sentiment out there. Do we need to worry about? Do we need to spend? Do we need to spend for this, plan for that trip, plan for that new house? We see how new housing builds in January have gone to a decline. So my biggest fear is, are we worried about stagnation or inflation or recession? But this is where the global chamber will play an important role by connecting those bridges with different countries, by connecting with the thought leaders in these different countries and groups to say, how can we work together and maneuver? How do we make lemonade out of lemons and how that we can get through that? So I'll put in the chat. I wrote a paper, and if you guys are interested, I would love to learn your feedback. It's in regards to a policy that I developed about 20 years ago in regards to tariffs. And one of the things I found was creating equality. Tariffs are good. We need to have tariffs, but creating equality across the board is saying if you import and you export, that we should be looking at it that way instead of punishing the countries. So I'm sorry, Doug, I threw a lot out there, but I'm a little passionate, but I'm a trade nerd. But I'll tell you, I say thank you to everybody who's been involved. You guys are really, I love to learn from you. I love to help in any other way. I have a great network of people, and if I don't know where I can help, I'd be glad to introduce the people who can. And like I said, please stay involved with Doug and these calls, because we are at a critical point right now, and to learn is really good. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, Chris. Buffalo, New York. Vanita Ross is in Salt Lake City, and she has access to resources on a global basis through the work she does at the mill. Vanita, do you have just a moment to introduce yourself and just say hi? Do you have any comments based on what you've heard today or things you're seeing in the market? Are you able to talk?
Hi, Doug. Yes, thanks for the intro.
Sorry to surprise you.
I know. But yeah, that's really good information. And I think the fact that they said that we have to learn to switch, like look at other opportunities, that's really a good idea. And I encourage people and businesses to look at exploring different opportunities and all the resources. And thank you. This is really good information to know. And thank you for sharing. Thanks to all those who shared that information. And yes, don't forget, for those on the call, we have a webinar with South Korea on next Thursday. Doug, if you can share that for me. I'm currently driving to a Women in Business conference with World Trade Association. Okay. But that's just opening up South Korea as another resource, all the resources they have. And they do have an expo that's coming up in Atlanta, for those of you who are in Atlanta in April. So they're going to talk about that as well. And that's good resources where you'd find people who to buyers and to get your businesses growing in South Korea as well. So that's a good opportunity as well.
Fantastic. Maybe Cesar, Vanita, and Joe connected because of the Atlantic connection. And then Jem, that event is actually on our calendar. And so if you wouldn't mind finding that, I think it's next week on the 13th, and putting that in the chat. If you haven't already done it, that would be great. Thanks, Vanita.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I don't see any hands raised, and I encourage you to do that. We only have about 10 minutes left. I see Melissa Menino here. She spoke at the Global Chamber Semiconductor Summit, and really appreciate that. Melissa, I don't know whether you're able to talk right now or not, but you're seeing undoubtedly some interesting things in the marketplace right now. Are there some things that you would like to share?
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, no, it's great to be here. I think as you said, it's a very challenging time, whether you're exporting or importing. I think, a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty right now. I think we are hoping that once the political, particularly, been focusing a lot on BIS, the export dual use export issues lately, and we just saw that the undersecretary was confirmed, and they've named the nominee for export administration. So hoping once we get those people in place, there's going to be a little bit more clarity on how things are going, what licenses are going to be approved, are licensing going to be approved. Seems to there's been a big holdup lately. So I think we're just trying to work with clients to make sure, right, they are vetting their supply chains, they know what the export classifications are, and sort of what their options are. When these when things sort of settle down. But it is a hard time. We are seeing clients that are having shipments stopped at ports, particularly the Seattle port, relating more to semiconductors, that are just CBP is just being aggressive and checking things, even though clients had already gotten licensing determinations that no licenses were required. So we are also seeing that sort of frustration at the ports and borders with shipments getting out. And so, yeah, I think it's just going to be a volatile time for the foreseeable future. But hopefully, in a couple months, we'll have a little bit more stability and can sort of, help clients, navigate these issues a little bit more smoothly.
Fantastic. Baker Hostetler is Melissa's firm, and thank you for your leadership. We've heard a little bit about Canada, but there's two experts, at least here in the room, both Eduardo Gonzalez and Christian Aguirre, who know Mexico and U.S. Mexico. Do either of you want to share what you're seeing in the world right now of trade?
Sure.
Hey, Eduardo. Good morning. Eduardo is the president and founder of 258 Consulting, focusing in on particularly manufacturers, both sides of the border, Mexico and the U.S. He's also the Global Chamber Phoenix Advisory Board Chair. Where are you today, Eduardo?
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate the introduction. I'm in Phoenix right now, well, in my car, in between meetings.
Okay, very cool.
And yeah, so what we're seeing is that the companies that are halfway on a project, they're still moving forward, but projects that are starting or we're looking to start an import-export or manufacturing Mexico operation, they're pretty much on hold right now. Of course, the biggest issue here is China. So I believe the nearshoring trend is going to continue. I think on the Mexican side, President Sheinbaum has been very conservative, very proactive, very willing to negotiate with the U.S. So I don't see much risk in the USMCA. The risk is more on the U.S. side, where every hour or every week things are changing. Tariffs, no tariffs, tariffs on autos, no tariffs on automobiles. So it's going to be probably difficult for companies to plan in the future with this type of strategies from the U.S. But like I said, the biggest the biggest issue here is China, right? Because of the political risks there are over there, the geopolitical risk of China taking over Taiwan, and that can disrupt again all the supply chains, as we saw in COVID, when containers went from $1,200 all the way up to $50,000 or $60,000. So those disruptions in supply chains are the real risks right now. And of course, tariffs. Some companies can absorb part of those costs, but other companies cannot. So it's really difficult to see where things are going to go. But business will find a way to continue. And I heard a lot of companies trying to diversify their exports, but that also takes time. But that's an option, right?
Absolutely. Christian, are you available to say hi? And if not, that's okay too. Christian Aguirre is our executive director in Hermosillo. Oh, hey, how are you?
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Are you
I'm
in
Christian
Hermosillo
Aguirre.
today?
Yes, correct. I'm in Hermosillo. And wow, we've been living a roller coaster ride with the tariffs.
Yeah.
As many know, or some of you know, I'm dedicated also in the export of salt to the US. So what we saw in the past days, we had all the shipments halted. And we're speaking to our brokers. We have brokers in the area of Tijuana, San Diego, and we have brokers in the area of Nogales, Mexico, and Nogales, Arizona. And they saw a huge decrease in the trucks crossing into the United States because obviously we had uncertainty of what was going to happen with the tariffs. And now that we got clear information yesterday that this was going to be more focused on products that do not go into the USMCA, well, things are starting to flow again. But this really looks like the same is going to happen on April the 2nd when that date arrives. And again, we're going to be in the risk of tariffs being applied. So this is getting intense. But business is starting to flow again. Products are starting to go into Mexico, going into the US. And it was fortunate that there was a good conversation between President Trump yesterday and President Claudia Sheinbaum from Mexico, and that they got into an agreement. And definitely this is something that there's got a point where it's going to stop, because if not, it's going to get tiring for the representatives in Canada, for the representatives in Mexico, and everybody all around.
Crazy. I'm glad it's open.
Doug.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry to jump in, but wanted to, Chris talked about how dynamic it is and things changing. And he talked about automotive is duty free. Well, late last night, they came up with another one that said if it's eligible under USMCA, CUSMA, whatever you want to call it, the free trade agreement, they'll honor that. And then there's not additional duties. There's no 25% on that. So it is happening, and it's very dynamic, and you're going to continue to see it dynamic as long as those people are they continue to make headway to what Trump wants.
Yep, got it. Very good. Well, thank you for sharing. We're just about wrapped up.
Hey, Doug, can I talk for 30 seconds?
Sure, Pankaj. Go ahead. What have you got? Some big news on foreign direct investment and historic foreign direct investment by TSMC in the United States, announcing $100 million or $100 billion. I actually had to go to their website to verify whether it was true or not. And since they're announcing it, I think it must be true. It totals now over $160 billion semiconductor investment. I think it's all going to Phoenix.
Yes, 165 billion according to their websites. And thank you so much. We joined Global Chamber Semicon in Arizona. We met a lot of people. And also we are working around the world for FDI. Anyone here in the meeting, first of all, happy International Women's Day tomorrow. And also we are a member of World Economic Forum. We based in North Carolina, started with very humble background. Doug, Cesar, and the whole team knows from where we are. But here, yes, we are going unstoppable and like a dog, but we are not a global chamber. We only do the FDI. So anyone is looking for FDI, my contact details is there, as well as you can reach out to Cesar. He can introduce to us. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Cesar, you're on the call. Anything that you'd like to add? Anything coming up we should be aware of? Anything you'd like to share? Cesar Trabanco, Global Chamber.
Hey, Doug, thank you. And I just want to thank everyone. I think this has been one of the most interesting between yesterday and today, most interesting conversation that we got in a couple of months. And you know, everyone is in the brink of, you know, what's happened next. And so it's really great to have people, knowledgeable people like Chris, like Francisco, Yo, and others. So thank you very much. I actually got a text yesterday from a member who is in Puerto Rico here with me. And the text was like, we need to be ready. There's a lot of opportunities coming. So I guess everyone is seeing this in a different way. And so we look forward to learning more and trying to be on top of what's next. For events and activities, Jem, if you can put the calendar there in the chat, that would be great. But we have next week our League of Extraordinaries on Tuesday. It's gonna be for Asia and the Americas. I think it's 4 p.m. Pacific time. And we also are building a couple of upcoming events like with Africa Call, the India Call. Check them out. And I'm also building the League of Opportunities. So if anyone is interested in presenting, the same with the one in Spanish, I still have some room available. So if anyone wants to jump in, let me know. Feel free to reach out and we can plan the calls. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Doug.
As Pankaj mentioned, tomorrow is International Women's Day. There is an event by a member of the London Intercultural Centre for quite a number of hours. I spoke at that last year, and we have Global Chamber members that I've recommended speaking tomorrow. And then the London chapter on Tuesday has a conversation that is International Women's Day focused, including Katie Keith and Lindsay Boyd. Lindsay is amazing. Katie is too. Lindsay has an amazing global connecting network. She's also on the Global Chamber Global Council. She's one of 15 leaders who are on our advisory board. She's based in Bali. So we actually moved the event up. Normally the London event is 1 hour later. So we moved it up 1 hour so that Lindsay could catch it before midnight in Bali. And she'll be one of the keynote speakers for that. So I encourage you to participate in that. Be aware, be connected, stay part of Global Chamber because of all the resources that are available. Things come up too that are unexpected, like those inspections that Sophia talked about, or the container that's stuck in Togo for Dimitris and others. The resources available at Global Chamber can help. And I'll leave you just with the words of what the newsletter was about this week. Hope. There is hope. Trade is increasing. There's lots of noise. There's lots of weird stuff going on. There's things that are just disgusting, you know, that are happening and very non-progressive, and that's not good. But we will continue. We will survive. And I definitely recommend the Jane Goodall book for hope. It's really helped me this week kind of get a grasp of, the progress that we collectively are making, that we each individually are making, is important. The more we get connected, the more we do trade, the more we talk about what our values are that were discussed today, the better the world is. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.